Hey everyone, welcome back to another Board Game Co. paid preview. This is Timelancers from Party Tales Games, and because the first time I filmed this, which I thought was actually pretty darn good as a dry run first attempt, it was, I think, maybe without fault, minus the fact that the front-facing footage got corrupted or overwritten. So, in honor of this game, I am going back in time and revising events of history to give you a new overview or preview of this game. This is Timelancers from Party Tale Games. It's on Kickstarter coming up soon. We're going to have the appropriate links for you to check out. Keep in mind that this is a prototype, so there are some elements of the game, like 3D printed pieces, that will be different whenever you actually see them. If you ever get this game and you pledge and it comes to your door, it's not going to look exactly like this. Things are subject to change, which is something that we say with most of the previews that come through the door, but just have to say it again so that you're not surprised if you're like, hey, I wanted Devin's specific 3D printed purple piece. Sorry, you're not going to get it. It's already up for bid, and there's a lot of action going on in that auction. Anyways, let's go ahead and tell you a little bit about this game. I've got the components off to the side here, and then the rest of the board set up. This is set up in a mock two-player game with only one of the player areas set up because the time machines are quite hefty in terms of size and scope, and I have a limited thin table in front of you, so I'm trying to show off the maximum amount of things that I can without the board being overly noisy in terms of visual details. So we've got the main board here. This is the city of Janusburg. Characters or players will start off at the Timelancer headquarters. Narratively, this is a world in which time travel was invented, but human DNA and the people of the time were not able to endure the rigors of that type of time travel. And so eventually human DNA was edited and a new species called Homo temporis was established. Those individuals were able to subject their bodies to time travel, and things happened. When you go back in history and repeat events, change events, wipe things out entirely, you really do affect the course of the future based off of what you do in the past. And what do you know, eventually it got outlawed, and people cracked down on the use of time travel, and the Homo temporis became, instead of sought after figures that were safe, they were now sought after figures that are not safe. And so Timelancers are these individuals who are able to go back in time, and their skill set is highly desired but also illegal. So we are Timelancers who can go back and affect history, and these are the headquarters in the middle of Janusburg. Currently, we've got two players set up in the main area, and then we've got the enforcers, which for a two-player game, there's going to be two enforcers, one on the armory, one on the laboratories, based off the enforcement deck over here that will get refreshed throughout the game, and the enforcers will move around. What they really do is just make it a little more difficult. You don't have free movement across the entire city. You can still go on those spaces, but you'll end up paying the prison bribe to still use the spaces that they're on. And if you pass through a space with an enforcer, you do have to either pay the bribe, or if you're not physically able to, you will then go to prison, which is not great. This is a action selection game based off of your movement, either through the city of Janusburg or on your time machine, which will have some chronological dates laid out that you could either repeat or revise based off of your end objectives. The goal in Timelancers is to be the individual or the player who has the most merits. You gain merits in a lot of different ways. You gain merits through the money that you have left over. So if you have kind of these credits or this currency, every 10 of these at the end of the game will give you a merit. You have resources. There are 6 different types. You have your attaché cases, your first aid kits, your weapons, your disguises, your cameras, and your communicators. All 6 of these are used to pay for different events to capture them and bring them to your own time machine. But they also, every 3 of them at the end of the game, will result in a merit. There are also side jobs that you can get. Side jobs require you to focus on particular types of events. This one gives you 2 merits at the end of the game per pair of captured science events. This one gives you 3 merits per revised middle-aged social event. And then, once again, we go to the main point of scoring goal or scoring merits in this, which is capturing events into your time machine and then also fulfilling your faction goals based off of the requirements that each of them has. So this is the base side of it. There is an advanced side if you want a little bit more of a challenge, but this particular character, whose name is June, is part of the Jikanuza, and their goal is to repeat one cultural event, to revise 2 military events, to repeat 1 science event, and to revise 1 social event. Unless a player gets all 4 of their end goals on here, which is one of the 2 end triggers to the game, either all 4 events, either all 4 end goals are listed, or you have 9 events that are captured on your time machine. If you have one of those 2 things, it triggers the end of the game. And that is the only time in which these end goals on the faction board are safe. If you ever have less than the 4 and you have not triggered the end of the game, then they're always subject to be removed if the condition of that goal is removed. For example, if I have repeated a cultural event, I've technically met the requirements for that. But revising history causes things to change. So if I intentionally, or if another player intentionally, ever causes an event to be flipped by them revising or by me revising or just choosing to flip an event, I go from repeating history to revising history. And now that this is on the revised side instead of the repeat side, this is no longer active because it is no longer applicable based off of my board. Now, for example, if I had another one somewhere else, then that itself would keep this being legal. But that's kind of how that works. So these are your events. They're spread out across the deck. You've got your science events, you've got your military events, you've got your cultural events, and you've got your social events. These are the 4 different types of events, and you're going to be paying for them or capturing them and either choosing to repeat history or choosing to revise history based off of where you want those to be on your board. And also, you will chronologically lay them out on your time machine. It's one of the 2 places where you can do actions. Going to what your core actions are, you have a character on the board. If they're in the city of Janusburg, they can move up to 3 spaces, each space fulfilling an action. So I could go to the tailor and spend 1 of my coins to get 2 disguises. And then I could go over here to the bank and gain 2 money back. So I'm net positive on money. And then I could go to the market and I could spend 1 resource of any kind to get another resource of any kind and trade that out. Those could be 3 particular actions that I perform on my turn. But you could also have your Timelancer on your actual time machine. And you might have some events spread all the way out throughout here. And just keep in mind that they do need to be in chronological order. Maybe I've revised that one. And so whenever you go to an event, you'll be able to activate, or whenever you go to an action on your time machine, you'll be able to activate one of these spots, which then allows you to either repeat history, revise history, get the benefits. Some things that you pay for will actually give you like lasting benefits throughout the game. So I'm always able to pay 1 less communicator for other events, which is useful, and it can reduce the cost of what I'm going for. But because other players are messing with history, they will be messing with what you're doing. And that's where it goes back to what I was saying earlier about revising events. So anytime you decide that you're going to revise an event, the unique thing about that is that any other event around the table with all of the other players that is a yellow social event will get flipped. The only way to block that is if you have a time lock on your card, which actually removes the time lock but doesn't require you to flip your card. So this is the main way to stay ahead of your opponents and also to interrupt the flow of what they're trying to create on their time machines and through their faction goals. The reason for that is when you're able to flip them, you kind of mess up the order of what they may be trying to do. Maybe they're trying to repeat certain events, and when you revise it, it flips it. Or maybe it's already on the revised state, and when you revise something, it requires all of them to flip to the repeated side. So you're able to influence the state of your enemies or your opponent's boards, but also the really cool thing is that in addition to doing that, it also flips the particular sides of the board that are that color. So the archives, the bank, the courthouse all get flipped. And that means that they're going to have either different values of what you can gain or completely different actions. And that's all based off of whatever event is being flipped whenever you revise it. That is a consequence of the revised version of the event, not just repeating the event. If you just gain an event, you capture it, you put it on your time machine, and you're going to get some benefits, you pay the cost. If it's just normal, you don't do anything to affect history or to affect the timeline. But if you're ever revising history, it sends waves, it sends ripple effects out, and so it will affect other social events and the social places on the board. So you can change the modular state of the city of Janusburg based off of revising events, and you can also force opponents to either try to protect their events to where they don't get flipped, or you can go ahead and mess them up. And so that's the part about this game that I think is really interesting in terms of player interaction, is you have that opportunity to manipulate the state of the game simply by your choice of either deciding to just take history and keep it as normal within the chronology of time, or to revise it and adjust how things are. Going over the other components of the game, you've got your events here. If we're going to look at the anatomy of an event, you have the name of the event, the time in which it is. You have to make sure that whether it's repeated or revised, that you keep the chronology intact, going from the earliest stages of BCE all the way to AD at the farthest point. You can kind of get a sense of where cards are going to land by their markers here. MA means middle-aged, A means ancient, and M means modern, which will give you a sense of where they're going to have to land in your timeline, as well as specifying for particular points. This has to be revised middle-aged social events, so none of these out here currently associate with my side job because none of them say MA on them for middle age. That's just something to keep in mind. So you have the cost of the card, you have the name of the card, the date of it, you have the amount of money that you get whenever you do capture this, which is the main engine for getting more money outside of locations like the bank. You have whatever the benefit is, whether it's going to be an instant benefit or a lasting benefit. You have the time that this event took place, as well as the type of event it is. This one would be a science one. And then you have the revised state on the other side, which is different from this. This shows that you're going to be getting a time gem upgrade, which is really nice. And I'll explain that in just a moment. So that's the iconography or the anatomy of a card for events. Over here you have your different resources, which are the 6 ones that I dictated. You have money, you have time gems, you have time locks and time gem upgrades, or time machine upgrades. All 4 of these things are not considered resources. These 6 are the only resources that are in the game. Again, the attaché case, first aid kit, the weapons, the disguises, the cameras, and the communicators. On your time board, though, you can see this particular thing where you're reserving an event, which you can only have one reserved event at a time. This doesn't cost anything. It doesn't have anything above it. Every subsequent time machine action has an associated time gem cost. Players start the game with at least 1, depending on the player count. The 3rd and 4th player might have 2 of these time gems. And these allow you to pay the cost of particular actions on the time machine whenever you want to do time machine actions rather than actions within the city of Janusburg on those city tiles. So you're going to have these time gems. The nice thing is, though, is you might be spending these throughout the course of the game to activate things on your time machine, but you can also get upgrades which will kind of lock in and imbue these pieces of the time machine with static power to where you have to pay less the next time you want to do that particular action. So those are super useful. And then, as I mentioned, the time locks are the one thing that allow you to lock in an event and make it safe for you to not have to flip it whenever another player is doing something. So those are time locks and time machine upgrades. And then the only other thing to keep in mind is you're not really allowed to backpedal at all. You can't ever go to a certain location, activate it, and then go back to the location you just came from. So you do need to move in an organic fashion around the map. That's pretty much how you play Timelancers. You've got a really nice, I love any game that provides player reference cards in terms of aiding the rules of the game, but it's a pretty smooth flow. You progress until somebody triggers the end game with either capturing their 9th event, which is going to lock up the entire chronology here, or you have someone who gets all 4 of their faction goals and when that happens, it will also trigger the end game. In both situations, you play out that turn. So if anybody hasn't gone, they'll get to go before the game ends. And this is Timelancers. I think probably the most clever part of it for me is the combination of adjusting the state of the board and adjusting other players' time machines when you revise events. So sometimes how you decide to interact with your events that you're capturing, and then also the actions that you can do on your time machine counter to what you can do in the city, create some interesting decisions for players. This is an upcoming Kickstarter from Party Tales Games. This is Timelancers. If you have any questions, be sure to let us know in the comments. And as always, I appreciate you guys. This has been another Board Game Co. paid preview, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.